whatever morning, Thursday morning. Thursday is kind of a fun day. You don't have the pressure of the full-on weekend, but also you have things like Thursday night football. And I've noticed that a lot of social events do happen on Thursdays because people are kind of like, it's close to the weekend. So you can do like a fun thing without it being a weekend night. You know what I mean? So I think Thursday is kind of a good day. It's one of my top 7 days of the week. Moving forth, I am going to do this review of The Carpenter. Now, many of you might remember from the old Subscribe to Mike Messier YouTube channel days, this channel used to have all these Mike's Instant Movie reviews. I've since moved them to the channel titled One Mike Messier. I've also been doing a lot less YouTubing lately because YouTube has kicked off 4 of my channels. Now, 3 of those channels weren't, or 2 of them at least, weren't even really public, but 2 of them were. One Man in a Camera Films, I put a lot of my stuff on there. It was starting to get some momentum, and suddenly the plug got pulled, not by me, but by the powers that be. So I'm quite upset about it. I'm looking for other opportunities for the social media streaming world, so any suggestions are welcomed. I know there's Kick out there, there's Rumble, there's all these things. But let's talk about this movie, The Carpenter. Now, if you happen to be watching, this is live Thursday, whatever the day, November 6th, November 7th. You can make a comment, and hopefully I'll see it, and I can respond. What's this movie about? It's from Angel Studios, I believe, the same people that brought you the big movie a few years ago about the trafficking, so to speak. I had my review of that movie, by the way, got removed from this outlet, so I don't even know if I can say the name of the movie. There was no cause for that review of that film to be removed, but it was. Anyway, getting back to this one, The Carpenter. We're in Jesus's time. I believe Jesus Christ himself is 30 years old, but it's really not his story. It's a story about this gentleman named Orrin. See, this is where my biblical knowledge is not so great. I'm not sure how much of this story was true or false or made up or whatever, but there's Orrin and his brother. They're both adopted brothers of this guy, this nice guy who's kind of, at those times, he was probably 50 years old, but you're almost dead back then when you're 50. Unless you're Saul or Abraham that lives to be 300 years old. But this guy and his wife have adopted these 2 strapping young men. Now they're both, the men are about 25 years old or so. One of them is a family man who basically is the fight promoter of his brother Orrin. So Orrin is basically doing the biblical version of MMA. So they have these fights that they fight. And they have rounds and they have referees, and it's kind of crazy because it's very similar to a UFC fight, except I don't think they had judges. It's basically a fight until one guy is knocked out, not necessarily dead, but basically a knockout type of contest. And they use music like Drowning Pool and Godsmack, the song Bodies Hit the Floor, Let the Bodies Hit the Floor. They use that song in this movie. So it's a pretty crazy concept. I mean, you're basically taking modern day mixed martial arts, modern day music, or, the last 25 years of hard rock type of music, and you're inserting it into this biblical story. And I mean, I'll give creative tip of the hat to Angel Studios or whoever came up with this thing, because if you're trying to reach people in different ways, for Christianity and stuff like that, and trying to reach people where they are and not just give them a story about a shepherd and a stump of land or an oxen, but you're trying to give these modern day people what they can relate to, hard rock music, and not even like Armored Saint or Petra or some Christian band, like bands that people actually like, like Godsmack. And as you might know, I've acted with the lead singer of Godsmack, Sully Erna, in the movie The Manor, of which I co-wrote. We played brothers in that movie. Brett and Ole Baton, along with Mike Bennett as our third brother, Darsaw. But in this one, we have Godsmack doing the music. We have, like I said, Bodies by Drowning Pool. And we have some pretty decent mixed martial arts fight scenes. Like the fight scenes were very legit. The fighters in these fight scenes were all very competent. It looked like they had some type of really good stunt coordinator on this thing. I don't know if that was whoever that was, but whoever did it did a nice job. And it's kind of believable. Like, I don't really think, I mean, who knows? I mean, I wasn't around during biblical times. I don't think they had organized, pit fighting, but maybe they did. I mean, who's to say? You know what I mean? I mean, I don't know if you've seen that video of the lady from like the 1920s in the background of a Charlie Chaplin movie, but she's like, looks like she's talking into a cell phone. But people wonder, were there like a type of cell phone back in the 1920s? I mean, we don't know. That's the thing about history. We think we know how things were happening, but we really don't. So going back to this movie, the gentleman that played Orin, I thought he did a good job. I mean, he was likable. He was kind of a gentle giant. One thing I did notice about this film, the character of Orin, they speak this movie in English. This English, see, that's one thing about, the Bible and biblical times. We always think that they sat around, speaking modern day English. Well, they didn't. They spoke, Arabic or whatever the hell they spoke, but they didn't speak our common slang terms and stuff. So this movie does have a thing, which I hate in modern movies. You got this. There's actually a "you got this" in one of the scenes where the fight promoter brother says that to Orin. He says, "You got this," about a fight. I have these little cliches, folks. They're basically, the two big ones are you okay? Any movie you see these days, they're going to have an "are you okay" thrown in there, and they're going to have a "you got this" thrown in there. So they had a "you got this," which is ridiculous because I'm sure they didn't say that back then, and so forth. Oh, Orin spoke with like just a very, monosyllabic, just a stoic gentleman voice. But the other characters all spoke, when American people do European voices, we always speak like this. We always use this little clipped accent. That's like how American people kind of cheat a European accent or even a Middle Eastern accent. We just speak very much like this, clipped. It's a clipped way of speaking that we do, American actors or just American people. If we're impersonating a European person of some kind, we do this ridiculous voice, and they do that like a lot of the actors in this movie. If you really think about it, it doesn't make much sense. If the people, the real characters or the real, situations back then, they'd be speaking Arabic or whatever. And if they were speaking English, why would they be speaking in an accent of a European person or a Middle Eastern person doing what American people do for the clipped accent? So it makes very little sense that our main character guy, Orin, is just speaking in this monosyllabic kind of, regular guy voice, and many of the other characters are speaking in that way that we do when we impersonate people from the Middle East. It's absurd. It really is. But these are the things that I notice. A lot of people probably won't notice that, but I noticed it. But even still, the characters were very endearing. Our buddy there, Orin, he's the adopted son, of this guy, and he had a good experience with adoption. So he kind of becomes a stepdad, hashtag stepdad goals. He meets this, woman, this, of course, if you meet a woman in a movie, she has to be beautiful. They never just have like an average looking woman as the lead. You know what I mean? Like, if you ever noticed that if there's a woman that strikes out, it's because she's physically attractive. So Orin meets this beautiful woman, but lo and behold, she's a single mother. So he kind of gets involved with her and so forth. So they have a little romance in this movie. She does have a daughter that's in a couple of scenes, like a little 5 or 6 year old daughter who kind of pops in and pops out. And basically the whole gimmick of this movie is Orin is going to fight in this big tournament in Jerusalem. And in the meantime, he's gotten a day job. And see, this is where they kind of shoehorn Jesus into this thing. Orin has a day job with the carpenter, who of course is Jesus Christ, or Yesiah, as they say. And they did use the Yesiah name in this film, which I thought was a nice touch. A lot of movies or stories about biblical times won't even use Yesiah, the true name of Christ, in the movie, but they do in this one, at least a couple of times. So Yesiah is in there as like his carpenter buddy, and Yesiah is even a bit of a matchmaker. He's a bit of a yenta. He's the one that introduces our buddy Orin there to the single mom. And nobody stops and say, "Hey, Jesus, why don't you hit that while you're at it? Like, why are you hooking up your buddy here with the single mom. Why don't you go for her yourself? There would have been a nice little, I think they could have done that tactfully. Like if Oren just kind of, because that's what guys do. You know what I mean? Like if your buddy is a friend with a female and you're interested in the female, you're going to ask, has there been any prior consultations of a certain subject matter, a certain way? Have you known each other biblically, so to speak? You're going to ask that question because you want to know what you're getting into. But Oren doesn't ask, at least in the context of this film. And they never have like the bro talk where he's like, well, what do you know about this lady? Or did you ever date her? Or what's going on here, Jay? So they don't do that. But it's, you know, we're trying to make a movie here. You know what I mean? So the Mike Messier elements of thinking are not going to come into Oren and Jesus and this single mom woman. But basically, Jesus is teaching him the ways of the world, the ways of good living, serving people. You know, I mean, it's a little unclear. How does Jesus pay his bills? You know what I mean? I guess he just owns a house. I guess back then in those days, you didn't really have landlords and rent. You just build your own house out of clay or whatever the fuck you made. So, and they didn't really go into like the toiletry situations. I mean, where do people go to the restroom back then? But who knows? But Jesus basically, and the guy that played Jesus was kind of funny. He looked like if you took Eddie Vedder, like a young, you know, Jeremy video Eddie Vedder, and mixed him with like a middle-aged Antonio Banderas. He kind of had like that, he's, you know, kind of a good-looking guy, but not too good-looking, kind of Latino or kind of, you know, Mexican, but not too Mexican. Like, definitely, you know, a vague kind of Jesus. But the actor did a good job, you know, but he was kind of like the Eddie Vedder Jesus here. And, you know, so on and so forth. But we don't have, like, what I did like about this movie also is we've already seen enough crucifixion movies. We've already seen enough, you know, Mary Magdalene and all these asshole movies. We've seen all these people before. I did like that this movie had new characters and so forth. And like I said, I don't know how much of this story is purely made up off the tip of somebody's head or how much of this is actually biblically inspired. It was a little bit unclear, but I'm not a biblical scholar. I'm not sitting there reading the Bible every day of the week. So in any regards, folks, I actually did like the movie. It might seem like I'm, you know, shitting a sandwich on it, but I'm actually not. I did like the movie. I just like to point out things that I see. I did see this movie I saw maybe 3 nights ago. So I'm just getting around to doing this review now. I did see another movie last night, Smile 2. Which I missed it when it was on like the really nice Dolby Digital screen, but I saw it now. So I think I might just segue into doing my Smile 2 review up next. If you want to stick around, like I said, YouTube has not been kind to me recently. So I'm looking into other options. If you have any comments about that, suggestions, I'm willing to take them. But I'm not going to, you know, just keep doing all this YouTube stuff if they're going to censor my material. That's it, Mike Messier. Go see the movie.